Welcome to the SJ Child Show. Thank you for all your continued support. You can find us at sjchilds.org. Enjoy the show. Thank you so much for listening and all your support. This is a two-part episode, so when you're done, go back and listen to part 2. Thanks and enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the SJ Child Show. I'm your host, SJ Childs, and today I have a really great guest. I know I'm prefacing what my guest is going to be like, and it's up to you guys to decide. But anyways, I really think he's great, and I'm excited to have this conversation. Dr. Tim Goldstein, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Well, I'm so glad to be here with you today. And, just from our chats we've had previously, I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, we seem to have really good chat going on. So everybody, I think, is really going to enjoy this, and a lot of great value and experience and education to share with our listeners and viewers today. So I'd like to start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I guess the important thing to start with this particular audience is I am autistic, and I was diagnosed at 54. So I am one of those, late diagnosed adults that we don't count in most statistics because most people don't know we're actually out there. Yeah. Going way back when, I had the joy and pleasure of growing up on a farm. So I do agree with Temple on that one, that the best place for a autistic kid to grow up is on a farm because you can't get in too much trouble. But on the other hand, there's great things to play with and learn and all that kind of stuff. Dad was a mechanic, so there was all kinds of fun tools and toys and that kind of stuff. And then, I went through school. Of course, they didn't know what autism was, fortunately. And I say fortunately because in elementary school, my mom had the school psychologist check me out because things weren't going so well with her and I, actually, not that they weren't going well with school. And of course, back that would have been in the 60s. And in the 60s, they institutionalized most autistic people. Yeah. So fortunately, they didn't have a clue that I was autistic because Tim spoke. There was no doubt that Tim was verbal. And back then, of course, it had to be nonverbal only was all they knew about. Yeah. So I say, thank goodness. So I actually went through, got through school, survived it. The social thing was terrible. I was horrible at it. But fortunately, because I grew up on a farm, I was bussed in. So I didn't have to deal with these people except at school. Which made it a little easier. And then, it was time to get a part-time job, had things I wanted. And my special interest at the time was bicycles, because this was mid-70s. 10-speed, was the in thing. They just got here from Europe, and it was the hot thing. So I got in the bicycle industry. And so that was my first career. And in that particular career, I started sweeping floors because I had no skills, really. And I ended up doing, international supply chain and sales teams and all those things over a period of about, 12 years or so. Successful there. So I got fired. Which is a recurring theme, by the way. And it was one of those, I had no clue why I got fired, but at least that one I did have vindication on, probably 2 years later, 3 years later, a few years later. We had changed our phone number to being a fax line and got a new phone number. So the owner of the company called, got a fax signal. So instead, he just grabbed a piece of paper and wrote down to you and said, "I'm thinking of making a change. I'd like to talk to you," and sent me a fax. And he asked me if I'd like to come back, and I told him to go to hell.
Not putting any more time into that, thanks.
Yeah. At that time, I had gone through then a period of, I'll say, the world's worst jobs, which is one thing that I think all individuals, autistic or not, need to do, is they need to find out that, there are crappy jobs, and fortunately, there's people who actually fill them. Yeah. And we need to be thankful for those people that are willing to fill them, because they didn't work really well for me whatsoever. Yeah. But it definitely did give me some, some insight into what you're going to say, what other people's experiences who, didn't have the opportunities I have can be like. And then I got into IT, technical world. And again, it was another one of those crazy things. I never thought I was going to go into IT. I was a geek. I had a computer. And I did have an internet connection in the early 90s. So, I was truly a geek.
You really were in.
Yeah. And we were leaving my wife's company's Christmas party. And she was working for a telecom company. And on the way out, she ran into the hallway to a programmer that she knew fairly well. And she just corners him and asks him, my husband loves computers. What can he do to get in the industry? Like, wow. Yeah. It's like, that's embarrassing. So he didn't know what to say. He grabbed another one of his buddies he saw close by, and they then said, get certified on Microsoft NT. I had no clue what an NT was. It was a corporate stuff. I mean, I'm just a home computer geek. But again, I had an internet connection, and I found a company in Canada that was teaching the Microsoft certification course online. So I went out and got certified in Microsoft, technologies, became a Microsoft certified systems engineer, which in the mid 90s, that was worth, $45,000 job instantly.
Yeah.
So I suddenly, almost doubled my income, and, I'm suddenly in the tech world. Let's see, I don't know, worked a couple companies, kind of kept moving up. Ran then the IT department for a small marketing company where we did a lot of data analytics based upon the marketing, a lot of them in banks and such, and ended up getting fired. So I then went into contracting. I needed a job. There were recruiters, so I went into contracting, and it was my first experience doing government work. And I went to work as for accounting, as a database administrator. And thank goodness for all you government employees out there. But let's say getting a certain amount of work done in a certain period was not high on their agenda. And I got sick of surfing in the internet 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
So I called my recruiter and said, get me out of this one, get me into something else. This is brain dead. Another one got fired, another one got fired. And the firings were always interesting because it wasn't my technical skills. It was always, I'd really say it comes down to communication. I mean, some of it you could say would be social challenges. But the social challenges were based upon communication, and the incorrect interpretation of the communication is what created the social situation. This is one you'll just, I'll share with you just because it's so interesting, and it does help people understand how even somebody fully qualified. I mean, I was pretty good at what I do. I was working for this one company. They had hired this guru to build a data warehouse. And I was hired then as the lead tech to actually do the implementation and do the building of it. And it became very obvious within a week or two that the guru they hired was fake. She was a fake guru. She did not know what she was talking about. She could give a great PowerPoint presentation and make you think like she knew what you were talking about. But when you got down to actually,
Netflix special about her, was there?
No, that she had that special skill. So what ended up happening was, I had overheard her as she's just like getting down on the poor administrator about, I need this whatever account to get this set up. And so I kind of interjected myself because this poor guy's just getting abused to death, and said, okay, do you need this kind of login for the database, or do you need a login that would be the normal network login? And she had no clue. Well, if you're a specialist in that particular thing, you should know there's two types of logins.
Yeah.
So that's, again, it was very obvious she didn't know it. So what do? Well, I think neurotypicals would do nothing most of the time. I think that's probably what they do. They would, look out for their own best interest, which, is fine. I did what I thought was the right thing to do, which was look out for the company's interest.
Yeah.
So I went to the CIO and said, we have a problem here. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's a total fraud. And the way he solved the problem was very simple. He fired me because, hey, I'm making the noise. So let's get rid of the person making the noise and not have to deal with the problem. So vindication came from that one too, because about 6 weeks later, enough other people caught on that she was, and she got fired. And the recruiter then contacted me and said, do you want to come back and, finish the project? And of course, my answer there was also,
take a hike.
You got it. But again, that was a communication kind of thing, which really turned into a social thing, if you think about it. Yeah. The communication was, okay, I thought you should look out for the company's best interest and talk about it directly. But the social faux pas I made was I didn't think about, not that I ever think about it, but I didn't think about it then. The CIO's image. He was worried about his image, that he had played up this guru so much. And now if he fired the guru because she's not good, that he would look like, So it became a social thing, but it was really a communication of, no, this is what's going on. And then he made it a social issue because it, we're going to make him look bad.
Yeah.
Any rate, 6 months later, he got fired too. So anyway, I kind of went through a series of that. And, one of the challenges that is often asked amongst autistic individuals, because this getting fired sequential kind of thing is not uncommon, is, well, how did you cover up the fact that you've been fired so many times? And it was actually really easy, because I actually worked for my own company and every contract went through my own company. So if you think about that, it took me a couple of years to figure this one out. But if you think about it, if you work for the same company, but you have different clients along the way, even if they fired you, did you get fired?
Same company. Yeah.
I worked for the same company the entire time. It just happened to be my company, and I happened to go through a lot of clients.
Yeah, definitely.
But it worked just perfectly well to, cover up, the fact that I got fired. So there's a tip for people is, put it under the concept of it's your own company, and you're doing these, and those are just clients. Those aren't the employers. Those are just clients of your company. And, that kind of progressed, finished another project, actually had gotten let go on that project, needed to find another new job. I tend to be a very strong interviewer, have a lot of sales background. So going in and selling myself on an interview is an easy thing. Actually wrote a book on interviewing based on it. And I ended up with 4 job offers in this next round of I was going to get hired. And I ended up on one of them flying out to their headquarters in Santa Cruz. And it was actually the lowest offer of all of them, but the place just seemed really cool. So I joined them. And I don't know, 2 years, 18 months, 19 months, I don't know, something like that later. We have an all hands, and it's announced Google's buying us and taking all the employees.
Wow.
And so now I work at Google, and and that's how I got there. Was I just happened to be in the right place, right time. Here I picked the lowest paying job and end up at one of the greatest companies in the world.
Oh wow!
And then now, and again, this is very non-traditional for autistics, but the reality is there's way more autistics that do this than anybody thinks. I work in the training department, and I'm one of their about 11 technical trainers in all of Google. But most people wouldn't think that autistic individuals would be trainers. But the reality is
good with delivering the information that's most logical and easy to understand.
Yes, there's that. The other part is it's actually easier than a social situation because I'm in 100% control.
Yeah.
I know when I can stop anything. I know when I can start it. I have full control.
Yeah.
As opposed to a social situation. So you don't have any of the social challenges that you run into when you're normally working with different groups and such.
Yeah.
So then I guess to throw in the other thing, the autism stuff, what happened there? I got diagnosed at 54. I was running my own manufacturing company while I had a full IT career full time. And I did that we had a jewelry tool and supply store just before that too. So after 13 years, I had 2 careers simultaneously for 13 years. And I finally burned out. And, my wife gave me you need to go do something about it. And I ended up going to our family physician, and they put me on some antidepressants. And, other than the fact that I went to work that day after taking them and wandered around the office for probably 20 minutes because I couldn't even figure out where my desk was.
Oh, gosh.
First time you ever took antidepressants, go to work. Oh, it was interesting.
Yeah.
But at any rate, once I got over the initial and my body started adjusting, it did improve my, interaction and such with people. And I decided, well, if my family physician can do that, well, what if I actually go to like a psychiatrist who specializes in this stuff? And I did. And once they kind of got me, balanced from being burned out, it became quite obvious that Tim was also autistic on top of it all. And that's how I ended up
causing the burnout, right?
Well, because then I had two special interests, and I was doing them all and all the hours.
Exactly.
And, so, at that point I knew I was autistic. So, what does a good autistic individual do when they learn about something new? It becomes their new special interest. And
research for hours? What is that you say?
That's right. And all that they talk, live, and breathe about is, at that point now, autism.
Yeah.
And I decided it was the autism at work that interested me, because that was this would have been like 2014, 2015, where you were just starting to hear about it in the news.
Yeah.
And I had read a news article that was an interview of a woman from EY. EY is what used to be called Ernst Young, but they call themselves EY nowadays. And she was the head of HR at EY. And she was talking about their autism program. Well, I've been in sales for years and years and years, and I'm autistic anyway, so I don't care. Which isn't true. As autistic people do care, but I don't care what you think about me. If I try to contact you and you don't like it, too bad, Yeah. So I just reached out to the woman that was in the article and said, hey, I'd like to meet you. And I don't know, funny story. She actually lost the email. She hunted me down through Facebook, and we ended up having a conversation. And she says, do you know about this conference coming up in like 3 weeks out in, SAP is sponsoring? Because SAP was, biggest private software company in the world. 77% of all transactions in the world go through their systems. And they were one of the leaders in the autism at work efforts. So I said, no, I don't know anything about this. I'm just trying to learn about autism at this point. And she said, I'll take care of it for you. And an hour later, I get an invite from SAP to go to the conference. Wow. So I show up at the conference, and suddenly I get to meet everybody who's in the autism at work. I mean, whether it's from Microsoft, from SAP, from DXC, just the who's of the corporate world in the starting of the autism at work stuff. Professors from Cornell I got to meet, ended up getting invited to go actually teach a class at Cornell. So I teach a class session every year.
Wonderful.
And all that came out of just going there. So I've become very involved in the autism at work field. And I guess I would say my spin on it, that's different from a lot, is instead of just talking about my story, which I do tell about my story, I'm quite open about sharing just about anything, we want to talk about. But coming up with ways, and I guess this comes from my sales and marketing background of having owned my own businesses and having sell products and all that kind of stuff. Coming up with ways to explain the autistic mind to somebody who's not autistic. So that instead of just going, oh, that's so bad that you get anxious when you have to, do whatever, that they actually understand what's going on.
Right.
And apparently I do a relatively decent job at it. And, I've continued to do that, and talk to companies that I never in my life thought I'd ever be invited to go talk to. International, NVIDIA, the video card, producers, Qualcomm, Thomas Reuters, and eventually ended up. I was actually just elected onto the board of the Autism Society of America.
Wonderful.
And, it's one of these, pinch yourself. Is this for real? I never thought in my life I'm going to be on the board of a national, nonprofit. How the heck did I get here? And it actually goes back
out to them. I better circle back.
Yeah. You definitely need to. But it was really funny. It actually went back to that SAP conference because the gentleman from SAP joined the autism board. and suggested they might want to talk to me.
That's great.
So yeah, it's just, funny how all these things kind of one feeds into the other if you let the flow keep going.
Yeah.
And I've just seen too many people, though, that they just freeze, they give up, they quit, they whatever. Never been in my constitution. My constitution says you keep going. I'm going to get up that mountain, or you're going to find me dead on the side. But there's no other choice about it. So that's probably too long an explanation for what you were asking.
Gosh,
but
no. You're fantastic. No, it's really great because I lead into, you answered all of the questions I would have asked. What was school like? What was employment like? And so that it covers everything. It was perfect. So let's talk about one thing we haven't really talked about. Is your wife autistic?
No.
Is that okay to ask? I should ask you that.
Oh yeah, no,
Is she okay
fine
with giving that information?
Yeah, no, she has ADHD.
Okay, she's neurodiverse then.
Yes, except I prefer neurodistinct, and
I like
and we can talk about that next if you want. I should write it down so I remember it. But, she was actually late diagnosis also. She wasn't diagnosed till she was in her late 50s that she had ADHD. Now, did we, was it obvious to, all of us that she had like extreme high anxiety and all that kind of stuff? Yeah. I mean, she'd sit there and, wherever she was sitting and be like ripping her nails apart and picking at them and, all the kind of, high anxiety things that you expect.
Yeah.
But no, it's kind of interesting because ADHD is almost like the opposite of autism. And the reason I say that is
distinct cousins,
well, there's a lot of overlap and commonality between them, but the big difference to me is most individuals who are autistic have a challenge in really understanding and processing emotion. Mm-hmm. Most people who are ADHD are extremely highly emotional. Yeah. That's where it's different. Now, a lot of the other things are identical in between the two.
And then you have both, right? Autism and ADHD. And yeah, that would be me, the highly sensitive person.
And that's not uncommon. I have, a lot of autistic female, acquaintances and friends. And, first off, I know more autistic females than statistically there should be in existence, which means the statistics are
ridiculously wrong. Agreed.
And it's amazing that the majority of them have both ADHD and autism, whereas amongst the male autistic individuals I know, it's far less common to have the two together.
Interesting.
So I don't know if any studies or anything have been done, but just anecdotally, that's what I have noticed is it's very common amongst women to have the combination of the two.
And my husband and son both have both. So maybe it's just, it's running real feverishly over here.
Well,
we have a lot to do. We just have so many projects to do.
That's something that I always say to parents when they're, mentioning about their autistic kid and, whatever. And especially if, they come from the tech industry or the kind of things that we associate with autism. Of course, there's a lot of other things that autistics do that people don't even think of. They can be singers, they can be actors, they can be, we're not all coders.
We'll find out in the summit coming up. You'll see all those amazing people.
Yeah. So, we're not all coders. I mean, I think maybe 10 to 15% of us are maybe in the tech industry, but nonetheless, so if they're in the tech industry, they're first off, you have an understanding that they're logical leaning kind of people. I mean, you don't hack it in the tech, industry doing code and stuff if you aren't fairly logical leaning. I mean, you don't have to be autistic by any means, but you have to be a logical kind of thinker.
Yeah.
So I always like to say to them when they're talking about their autistic kid, and it's pretty obvious that they're probably autistic too, that you know that it's 80% hereditary, by the way. So it's either you or the mother. I don't know which, but somebody in this game probably.
Exactly. And I'm so glad that that's becoming a reality because it's not, put the, I hate to see even say the sentence, but put the blame here, put the whatever, it's like, this is because it's the evolution of our brains. And, what happens is we change through time, like we always have and always will. And the easier we can accept it, the better, right? The faster, the better.
Right. I mean, when you think about it and you look at, we could take autism or we could take ADHD. I mean, they both have different, we'll say, specialties about them. And we wind it back out of, the industrial era and go back to earlier errors. Well, if I was in a hunter-gatherer kind of tribe type thing, I want somebody with ADHD in the front.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at everything,
Very observant. Yeah.
On the other hand, for things that need to make sure they get done and seen all the way through, I want somebody with autism that's going to be like, I don't care, I'm just going to do it. That's it, period.
Oriented.
And now the problem is I actually think that it's not that autism is increasing. There's people who think that the rates are increasing and there's something going on and it's making more autistic individuals show up. No, we just never knew how to count them. That's
Our
all.
perception has been changed, I think, too. The view of it looks different.
It's
looking like this, then wow, everything's open to see. So
yeah, I think it's actually the Industrial Revolution is the turning point, because if you think about it, what did people do pre-Industrial Revolution? Well, you were small towns. They were tend to be more local. There were cities, but still things were much more local. And when your kid got old enough that they needed to work, they either, went with dad and they became dads, or moms or whatever, obviously back then, for the most part, women didn't work. Women were considered to take care of the home. So, but you were trained by, whoever, or, dad happened to know the, whatever, the blacksmith that was down the street. And, you showed some interest in it and they'd go down and say, hey, would you mind taking my kid on and seeing if, Exactly. And you were mentored into it. And we all know, now if you take an autistic individual, the best way to teach them something is mentor them into it, not, it's traditional, write it on the board and do all this memorization crud. But then we went to the Industrial Revolution, where suddenly everybody is supposed to show up with the right job skill with nobody ever training them or teaching it to them. And everybody is supposed to be essentially identical. I mean, that, I can replace you just like I'm going to replace any other machine. Bring in another one, it's going to be just as good as yours was. And that's when I think it now started becoming a problem, because we aren't interchangeable.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so to me, that's the focus. I put it at that point. The Industrial Revolution is what caused the problem, because before we just went into whatever career and we were mentored in it, and we probably did a great job because we cared about,
yes,
the quality. That one's actually an interesting little story too. How there's the concept, I think it's actually in the DSM. They should take it out because it's wrong. That we like repetitive things. Yeah. I hate repetitive crap. Right. I don't know. How much do you like repetitive crap?
No. And my son loves it. There's a percentage that do.
But it's not.
No, not all. Not everyone.
It's not all of it. But here's what was going on. It was, I was doing some synthetic biology stuff. Decided I wanted to learn synthetic biology. So, what the heck? I put a whole lab in the house and started doing synthetic biology. And I was doing what they call aliquoting, which means taking and dividing stuff up into portions. So I was getting stuff prepared to be able to do multiple rotations of an experiment, from, the big bottle to the little amounts you needed for each experiment. And some of it was powdered and some of it was liquid. So some of it was weighing it out on a scale and some of it was, measuring it in a graduated cylinder. And I'm down there just having the time of my life, just doing this, having a great time. And it dawns on me, if somebody were to just peek through the door and look at me, they would say, those autistic people like doing repetitive stuff. Because I'm doing the same thing over and over again. I'm measuring out 20 samples of the same thing, 20 samples of this thing. And, it's the same thing over and over. What they missed was, to me, it wasn't doing the same thing. It was the challenge of getting them so that they were exactly to 1 milligram right. Now, did they need to be to 1 milligram? Probably not. But, hey, I had a milligram scale and they needed to be at least to 1/100 of a milligram. So let's just go for the full milligram. So to me, it was actually the challenge was the interest. And the fact that there was a repetitive nature to get that challenge was somewhat immaterial. Yeah. So if you think about it, what the person peeking in, so we'll say neurotypical peeking in, looking at this, they're thinking about end outcome. Oh, that's boring crap. Geez, they like doing repetitive stuff because they're only thinking about what's the end result. They're not thinking about the process and the effort and challenge of doing that process over and over and over again. I like to liken it to gaming. Why is it we don't take somebody who is a big gamer that, they could be, let's say it's an adult, why not? They get home from work and they go into their gaming room and they game for 5 hours straight. You have to shove their dinner in front of them to even get them to even think that there's dinner. And they just game till it's, middle of the night. Well, how repetitive is the friggin' gaming? You got some controller and you keep stabbing on buttons and things jump out and you shoot them. And it's pretty damn repetitive to me. But what do we say about that person? We say about that person, oh, they're really into gaming. They must be getting pretty good. That must be a really good game they're playing. But we look at the autistic individual who's doing it for the same thing. Yes, there's a repetitive nature to gaming, obviously, but there's a level beyond that, which is the challenge of doing those repetitive things in, a way that's going to be more effective than it was last time.
Yes, exactly.
So why don't we look at the autistic individual and go, wow, they must really enjoy delivering absolute top quality.
Absolutely.
And instead we say, oh, they just like repetitive crap. And then we give them jobs folding shirts and wonder why they quit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Isn't that the truth too? And the skills and the experiences that they could have aren't even given a chance. Because they're not able to perceive the enjoyment one can get. And then, like you said, the quality that become of that.
Well, right. That's the whole goal is to hit some standard. It might be an arbitrary standard. It may be, in my case, it was a clearly identifiable standard of, within 1 milligram of this particular amount. But either way, you're coming out with extremely high quality work. Which actually can be a challenge and a problem in the work world. Yeah. There's a autistic individual I know that had reached out and contacted me, and they had the boss had the talk with him, and the talk was, "You're not coming along as fast as we expect of you. We're kind of disappointed." Now, this person's they're brilliant. They have a master's from Vanderbilt. They, they invented some stuff that goes in the astrophysics world. They're just off the chart brilliant. So what's going on? Why is it this brilliant person who's doing a job that, it's certainly a challenging job, but it doesn't require Einstein either, that the manager thinks that they're not doing well? And it's actually really simple, but nobody ever explains it. And this is what's going on is us autistic individuals, I'm convinced, we tend to build things up from the bottom up. So we have to get every single detail. Yes. And from every single detail, we create our own conceptual view of it. Well, it takes a while to collect every single detail. Now, the way most neurotypicals go about it when I ask them how they do it is they start with the concept that's already been predefined and only go deep enough to do what they got to do. They don't care about all the details if what they need to do doesn't require knowing all the details. So first off, that's going to make the autistic individual ramp up slower because they're actually learning a lot more.
Yeah.
Secondly, if you start with a preconceived concept, how innovative can you be? You're already inside the concept. You're locked into this one concept.
Exactly.
Okay. You can come up with a little creativity inside of the concept, but still you're not going to be coming up with something revolutionary because you've already got the concept of this is the way it is. But if you do it the way that most autistic individuals seem to do it, which is you get all the details you can, and you create your own concept that fits the details. That's where innovation comes from, because I got no preconceived notion of how it works. I'm just going to look at, okay, I got all these pieces and this is how it seems to interact to me. And that's how I actually build and base a lot of the way I explain different things about autism is, okay, so I took all the details and then I just think about, okay, I put my marketing hat on and think about, okay, if I got to talk to just the general public and get them to understand this, what can I do? And I don't follow any pre-existing concept.
Exactly. Oh, and yesterday I was on a live and the gal I was talking to mentioned that what her son's pediatrician had kind of explained to her. And now she's been, raising him for 13 years. So it's not new to her or anything like that. But back then he said, I want you to think of it as a language barrier, that you are dropped into a country where you don't know the language, you don't know the customs. And so everything is a little bit different for you to understand how to help them. But over time, you will learn the language and you'll learn the customs, but you'll still have your own language also. And I thought that was a really simple way to help, somebody understand it. What do you think about that?
No, that is a good way. And it's actually interesting. I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. We recorded it. It's coming out in August. And it was two gentlemen. One of them was from Israel originally and lives in, I think he's Vancouver. He's in Canada. I think it's Vancouver. He's on the West Coast. I think he's in Vancouver though. And then there's a American gentleman who somewhere in the Pacific Northwest also, but not in Canada. He's in the US. So he's probably in Vancouver in the US side, probably.
Right.
And the Israeli gentleman came up with a question. And his question was, in Israel, we're very direct. The way we communicate is very in your face direct. And then he said, we had this colleague who went and gave a presentation in the Netherlands. And somebody, from the Netherlands, a Dutch gentleman, came up and said to him that was very good. And now this was an American that had given the presentation. And, we know how it is in America. You don't say anything bad. You have to say all good things about everything all the time, no matter what's going on. So he asked some of his colleagues that were there at the conference that happened to also be, Dutch, okay, they said this. Now, were they saying that to be nice, like we would in America, or were they really meaning that it was really good? And the Dutch colleague he asked said, we're Dutch. We don't do nice. If he said it was good, it was good. If he said it was bad, it's really bad. So the question that they had based upon that was, in your experience, have you seen a difference in dealing with different cultures as far as the challenge being greater or lesser with different cultures? And now I've never worked with any Israelis directly, nor have I worked with any Dutch directly, but I worked with a woman whose husband was Dutch, and they were into airplanes, and I was into airplanes. And so she would talk a lot about her and her husband and talk about his Dutch ways. So I understood at least, kind of what she meant. And what it made me think of is I've worked with a lot of Russian programmers over the years. And Russians tend to be pretty in your face direct also. And you know what? I never thought of it, but his asking that question made me recognize, it really was a lot easier working with the Russian programmers, because you could just say, it's this, bang, 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 exactly. There was none of the having to be, nice and sociable and dance around of this is so good, but we need to make this little change to this one little thing. You can just walk up and say, hey, this part needs to be fixed. Next, move on.
Exactly.
So I think that fits in with what you're saying is it's a different language. No, it's past a different language. It's actually a different culture that has a different language.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the language portion. It's the culture of, if we were in Israel, just being direct to you and saying, no, that's not the way it is certainly acceptable.
Yeah.
Now in America, I would have to, to be acceptable, I would have to say, it's a really interesting kind of nifty idea, but and maybe butter it up and then somewhere between the lines is really what you were trying to say. Yeah. And as autistic individuals, I don't get between the lines. I get the words. They are literal. They write them in dictionaries. What they say in the dictionary is what the word means. So that was an interesting point, and just dovetails with that of, just take it from being it's a different language to it's a different culture that has a different language. Yeah. And that's probably even more of what it is. And could you and I go to Israel and, learn to speak in Hebrew and, manage to learn the culture? Yes. But Are we going to be totally comfortable with the directness and such? No, that's not the way we were brought up. So it is a stretch. It is a challenge. But we do need to obviously learn to accept, no matter what culture you come from, that, hey, you're just another person. You do have different experiences, different backgrounds, but guess what? There's more in common than there is that's different.
Absolutely. And I think I saw you once on a podcast with Barry Prezant, and I love his representation of just humans, right? That like we're all human. We all jump up and down and clap our hands and flap our arms and blink our eyes and do all of the things. But when we really try to give each other grace and understanding for that, and each other's space and compassion, that's where we can start changing our world's, problems and things is through that type of attitude and mindset.
Very much so. And, again, kind of putting it in the work context, when, I got my current manager, and the manager before that, and even the manager before that, first time I met them, I gave them a sheet of, here's 10 tips of how to manage an autistic individual. And I crossed off the ones that don't apply to me, which wasn't very many.
Repetitive behavior. Nope.
Right, exactly. Cross that off. That one really don't apply to me. But, these other ones of you need to be very direct. Don't, no dancing around. Give me firm things. Don't give me things to go in two directions at the same time. I can't do that. I can go one way at one time. Exactly. I'll go one way really good, but I can't do two at the same time. Give me priorities, because I can't read your mind of what's important to you and what your manager's asking out of you to get done from the department.
Yeah. So
prioritize for me. That isn't because I'm weak at it. That's because you know more about what the demands are than I know about the demands.
Exactly.
Because I might pick it based upon, well, this is the most challenging one and it sounds fun, so I'm going to do this one first. And it could be the least important of the group.
Yeah, exactly. So,
because maybe there's another one on there that his manager's leaning on him about of getting done. I don't know that. Yeah. How am I going to know that? I wasn't in that meeting.
Yep. Information is key, isn't it?
Very much. And it's got to be clear. It's got to be concise, and it's got to be completely unambiguous.
Yes.
And I would say whoever is, talking to an autistic individual needs to be ready to answer questions.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to play read your mind games. We're going to say, tell me this, explain this one. What do you mean by this? And a lot of people take that as meaning that, you're not competent, or they take it as meaning that you don't have the motivation or wherewithal to figure this stuff out yourself.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous. Why is it socially, it's more acceptable to mind read and get the thing totally wrong and waste everybody's time and money than it is to spend 5 minutes talking with you, asking you direct questions of, okay, what exactly do you want? How fast do you need it done? Is it more important than this other thing you gave me?
Yeah. My husband and I were recently talking about, we're always having discussions of what kind of projects we can create and move forward and do grow all of these things. And one idea that he had, and no, I'm not supposed to be sharing all of his ideas, but I love it. One idea he had was the clear intentions movement. And not only that we need clear intentions, but it's interesting where it came from. I am helping out a local project with our local children's hospital where we're building a sensory room in their emergency room department and helping train the ER staff.
Oh, way cool.
Isn't that great?
I like that. Cool.
Thank you. I was in an interview with Temple Grandin, and we were talking about ways that, I could, maybe ideas that I could give the hospital to help make it, a good place. And she said, if there's any way that they could make clear equipment, so that the kids could see inside the thermometers, see inside the things, just everything clear, how much easier that would be for them to understand the process that they're going through and be able to explain it to them. And I love that. And so then it went into another interview with a Food Network chef, Simon Munjambar, who is a fantastic fantastic guy. He does some foundation, like food prep things, for autism foundations once in a while. And I said to him, now, if you make sure that when you're doing those, you use clear containers, just clear glass for cooking and for mixing, and so that everybody, can see what's inside and see the process that's happening. I just think it's so beautiful how far we can go with this. Not only do we want the clear intentions of the words, but we also would love the clear intentions of the happening around us, right?
That's so interesting, because one of the challenges as an autistic adult, particularly in the workplace, but it could be in many other situations, is people try and intuit your intentions. Mm-hmm. And apparently that's a normal thing amongst, neurotypicals, is to intuit intentions. They just intuit what it is. And then they assign the attention. And if they, assign the attention that you did it because you're a jerk, then you're a jerk the rest of your life.
Judgment, right?
Right. So, what happens, of course, is, we have in our culture, and I like to say our culture is actually from a total another universe. That's how different it is. Yeah. So, we're one of these aliens, and we're here on Earth, and, we say something, and we're brutally blunt, which is a very common autistic trait of just,
Thanks for listening. Check back tomorrow for part 2 of Tim Goldstein, Communications Expert.